remember the next one is from our friend Steve Darrow. And basically, let's say, I haven't seen any of these before. So Steve Darrow says, at some point along the continuum from know-nothing college SJW at one end to Hillary, Bernie, and Barry on the other, there has to be a point of realization that progressivism is a scam. I watched Enemy at the Gates recently, and the role of the political officer struck me. I thought about seemingly intelligent friends who are strongly progressive, and it makes me wonder if they would welcome a tyrannical government because they wish to be der Kommissar in the new order. What percentage of progressives do you think are in on the scam versus just being useful idiots? That's actually not just a good question, that's the question. I think that there is not that kind of distinction, Steve. I think that even the most useful idiots understand that there's something not true about this, and I think that even Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders believe it to some degree. I don't think it's a point where you just suddenly realize, oh my God, this whole thing is just a lie, and it's a con game. There you go. They all know it. And so your question, I think, well, the question I want to answer anyway, this is my show, is that what is their motivation for being so sympathetic, not only sympathetic to tyrannical regimes, being, in fact, the authors and the movers of tyrannical regimes? I know I say this all the time, just needs to be said all the time. The communists were international socialists. The Nazis were racial socialists. The communist Chinese were class socialists, like the Soviets. 150 million people killed. So there is something about the collectivist mindset, and the one thing I would be willing to say is, I do not know where the wedge is. I suspect we're born with it, but something is splitting people into two different groups, and the two different groups are, we're playing bingo. One is R and the other's K, but let's just think of it in a little more easily accessible form here. People are born to be sympathetic to collectives, or people are born to be sympathetic to individuals, and that's what determines all the rest of it. If you are a collectivist, you believe that the survival of the group and the improvement of the society and all the rest of it is the goal of all of us together. It's the culmination of, I was going to say a life's work, but an individual life's work is not really that important to them. You believe that your purpose is to serve society. And I don't believe that nonsense at all. I think society exists as a group of individuals. So if you're a collectivist, you have, in fact, got a fairly low tolerance for human individuality, which means you've got a fairly high tolerance of murdering individuals, right? If you're a collectivist, you don't believe in the sanctity of individuals, if all you see are groups, then you are stuck because you think that the world can be made perfect by making society perfect. I think that the world is not perfect because of biological conflicts in the human animal that we share with virtually all other animals on this earth, and that as civilized people with a cerebral cortex, we are in a period of our evolution, which we've been in this period for many, probably 100,000 years, but certainly for 8,000 or 9,000 years. Human beings are now caught in a world between the biological instincts that got us to where we are, and then having the cerebral cortex, the intelligence, the reason, the restraint, the discipline to rein those things in. And unfortunately, we can't rein them all in all the time, and some people don't rein them all in at all. Sometimes nobody reins anything in. Some people are just wild, self-centered murderers, rapists, thieves, and all the rest of it. Thieves. It's hard for this audience to understand, I know. When we think about thieves, we think, well, I don't know if I'd have the guts to rob a bank, or I certainly don't think I'd ever go into somebody's window. But really, if you get right down to it, there's not a person who's watching this show, who's a regular anyway, who could take somebody else's stuff knowingly. You just couldn't do it. It's wrong. And it's wrong because you're an individualist, you see? If you're a collectivist and if you're a collectivist and all you see are groups, then if you have a poor person breaks into a rich person's house, he's basically committing what you consider to be social justice, when in point of fact, he's committing simple burglary. You are taking stuff from an individual that an individual worked for. He or she was not assigned their house and their car based on race. We both know this is true. We can agree, certainly I can agree, that there was a time in our history where races were excluded or legally persecuted or denied access. No question about that. I'm just saying that hasn't been the case for 50, 60 years now, and it might be time for you progressives to progress a little bit. That's really it. If you don't see people as individuals, then stealing from an individual doesn't bother you. You're just taking for your group what the other group has. And then you get to the real crux of the matter here, Steve, because in order to be a progressive, you have to have one ingredient, one. All of progressive. If you understand this, then politics in America, politics throughout world history, it all gets very simple if you can understand just this one thing. Well, that's uncanny. I just turned to the door and thought, I wonder where she is. And then I heard the door open, and there she is. You cannot have socialism without envy. You can't have it without envy. And even in the places, there she goes, even in places like Sweden, you are still basically envious. And what you're envious of in Sweden is not your neighbor's house or car. In Sweden, which I will admit is a pretty advanced form of socialism, in Sweden, you are envious of everybody else's moral stature. So you will sacrifice your own rewards, because if you didn't, you'd be an outcast. So if you believe in the collective, then you are likely to have enemies. And since you believe that society is perfectible, when you find out it's not, then it can't be because of this stuff, right? It can't be because of this stuff, because if it's true that we have biological flaws, that we're greedy or rapacious, or sometimes we're ungrateful, or all the rest of it, if you believe that to be true, which I believe, and which individualists believe to be true, if you believe that it's built into the human condition, then you can't be a progressive anymore. So if there's a problem in society, like poverty, let's say, or injustice, then it has to be the fault of society. And if you can re-engineer your society, you think, then you can engineer a society that raises perfect people. And my point is, you're not the first people to give it a try. SJWs, you might want to do a little reading. There were 150 million people killed in the last century trying out this idea of yours, which is pretty spectacular failure. And it's not just an economic failure. It's a moral failure. It leads to at the best case scenario, Sweden, it leads to an absolutely uncanny abandonment of just the fundamental life force. Watch Swedes commit suicide right now, and culturally, and you realize they don't have any fight left in them. Of course they don't have any fight left in them. What would they have to fight for? Everything's given to them. Sweden is the world's largest nursing home. Cradle-to-grave benefits. Oh, wow. And it's all free. No. Your cradle-to-grave benefits are paid for by your endless working for somebody else. You work endlessly for somebody else. And so if you are a collectivist, you have to be... I can just sum this up very quickly and I'll get going. If there are individuals in the world and you take their money, then it's stealing. If there are classes or groups of people and one group or class takes something that belongs to another group or class, it's justice. So, that's what it has to be. Of course they want to push people around. This is how stupid and lazy people get nice things. I'll tell you, you don't have to go any further than this. I was looking for a good example, but you just don't. It just happened 8 months ago, 5 months ago. I don't even remember. Here it is. Fidel Castro, who you progressives adore. And let's just go over the reasons you adore him. You have a corrupt regime in Cuba. That's true. But America's not Cuba. America's not got that kind of corruption. The only place you find that kind of corruption in America is in democratically controlled cities. You don't find Batista-level corruption among the American people. You only find it among Democrats in cities. And corruption is bad, and I agree. And so you've got these people who are very poor. And they're very poor because their social system limits them, caste and all the rest of it. So along comes this bearded guy, and his name is Fidel, which means truth. Wow, how about that? And he and another guy named Che, who wrote his diaries on motorcycles, and they're romantic and handsome, and they're rough around the edges. They're everything that American boys aren't. They're dangerous, and they're not playing by anybody's rules, and all the rest of this stuff. So Fidel, out in the jungle, a simple man of the people, who apparently during his entire life had one shirt his entire life. Fidel, man of the people, who wears one shirt his entire life and dresses like a common person because he is, overthrows the corrupt Batista regime and turns the entire wealth of the country over to the people of Cuba and divides everything equally. And even though they're very poor, at least they're all equal. No one's better than anyone else, and no one's richer than anyone else. And that's why you love Cuba. And when Fidel Castro died, he had $900 million in his personal bank account. $900 million is how much money Fidel Castro had left. Not how much he totally spent during the course of his life, because that was billions of dollars. But when he died, Castro still had $900 million of reserve money that he hadn't spent yet, which he stole from the Cuban people. That's an awfully inconvenient truth, don't you think? Don't you think that's a little inconvenient that Fidel Castro has had $900 million? Where did he get it from? Fidel Castro didn't invent the iPhone. Fidel Castro didn't work in the fields, didn't do anything. Fidel Castro stole it from the people who were stupid enough to believe that if he wore the same green shirt every day of his life, then people would believe that he's poor just like them. $900 million. Now, ask yourself how a rather scrangly, a tall, and very smart, no question about it. Ask yourself how a young Cuban lad, I don't know how old he was during the revolution, I want to say early 20s, let's say, maybe a little bit later. If you're young Fidel Castro, working out in the back of Cuba, you're either I don't know what his background is. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he was a rich student. But in any event, there you are, you're young Fidel Castro. And so if you're going to end up with $900 million, Fidel, how are you going to do it? Well, you're not going to start an auto plant. You're not going to start a casino. You're not going to do any of those things. You're on the outside. So you launch a revolution. I have no doubt at all that you believed in it when you did it. I have no doubt that you believed in it. But then over time, you began to realize that power is really nice, that you like living in Batista's place, and that you like the cars, and you like the submission, and you like all the respect, and you like standing in front of groups of people and speaking for 4 hours as if people cared. And you become a champion of the working man. And you sit on your moral perch, you fight the great Satan, America, which has the audacity to let its own people determine their own destinies and succeed and become relatively wealthy, because your people are starving. And you do all these things, you get all this stuff you want out of life, and then you die with $900 million. Folks, you might want to notice this. Mao didn't go back to his classroom. Stalin didn't go back to being a seminary student. Stalin had one job in his entire life, which was he worked at a meteorological station for a couple of months or something, wrote down temperatures. That's the only job he ever had. Stalin didn't go back. Lenin didn't go back. Trotsky didn't go back. None of these people went back to the poverty that they came from and that they claimed was the reason they were launching their socialist revolutions. None of them went back. Because if they had gone back, they'd still be wrong, but at least they wouldn't be hypocrites. If they had gone back, then they would say, okay, they're hypocrites. They're not hypocrites, rather, but they're still idiots. So that's it, Steve. If you are too stupid and too lazy to go out and make a good life for yourself, if you have no morality, and if you see people as just a group of impersonal classes out there, you can make a pretty decent living by being part of the team that's taking from one group of people and giving it to you. And that's the best case scenario. Best case scenario. I talked to Natasha, and she simply can't believe the tax situations in America. She's literally dumbfounded by it. She stops her cold. I don't know what they pay in Russia. I want to say it's 16, 17% or something. Oh my God, we got a whole class of hardworking elves back there. Thank you, Bill.
See you, Bill.
Alrighty. There she goes. My God, here we are. Craziness. It's a menagerie. I'll just do the show in a closet next time. So you've got bye. I know I was talking about something valuable. Oh, yeah. Natasha was saying, wait a minute, I want to make sure I get this straight because tax time is coming up and I have a large check to write to people I don't know who take my money without providing any services that I can see. And she says, wait a minute, so you've been talking about income tax this whole time? Yes, we've been talking about income tax, trying to plan things out. But when we go to the grocery store and you look at the receipt, there's a tax on that too. I said, yeah, that's a sales tax. She said, so they tax the money coming in and then they tax the money going out. They do both. I said, yeah, that's America, land of the free. When you get that simple, when you really look at things with fresh eyes, you realize, no, it's theft, Steve. You know this. So there are people out there, the people who want to become progressives, use the moral fig leaf of helping the poor so that they can help themselves. And I've been saying it quite a bit lately, but James, I want to say Maybury, who wrote the Uncle Eric books, said, everything makes sense if you just understand this. They do not collect taxes to provide benefits. They provide some benefits in order for them to be able to collect the taxes. If you understand that, then everything makes sense. I just finished corporations for TPUSA. We'll release those all in short order. The next one is government, and I wrote all three and shot all three at the same time. And the sixth one, number 6, the third of the second series of 3, is taxes. And I was trying to get an idea and try to explain to people how much money we spend in this country. And this goes to your question, Steve, because this is not just a river of money. Let me just give you a couple of examples here. We spend about $3.5 trillion a year, $3,500 billion a year. How much money is that? Now think about this, because it's true. If you spent $1 million every single day since the birth of Christ, you would still not be at $1 trillion. And we spend 3.5 of those every year. If you spend not $1 a day, not $10, not $100, if you spent $1 million every day since Christ was born to today, you still would not have $1 trillion. And we spend 3.5 of those every single year. So where does it go? Well, it goes from people like you and me to people like our Facebook poster there, who wail about injustice. It goes to social justice warriors. It goes to all kinds of people. It goes to people who are driven by envy. And this is where the white privilege thing comes in. Because I was not told that anyone else is responsible for my failures, and I was also told that no one else is responsible for my livelihood. I was never given the idea that people owed me anything, so I didn't sit around waiting for the Great White Father to come down and give me a car. I figured if I wanted a nice car, I had to go make my own money so I could get my own car. And that's how I grew up, and that's what, if you want to talk about white privilege, that's it. I didn't have anybody to blame, and I didn't have anything to wait for. Nobody owed me anything. But my success, to the degree that it is success, you want to take a look at the finances here when the taxes are written, but to the degree that I've had some success, did not take away anybody else's success. My success and, my little private airplane in this office is not taking money away from people who are in tenements, who could be in college studying to be pharmacists or brain surgeons if only I hadn't stolen their money so I could have my toy. It doesn't work that way. The work that I got paid for is work that I did. It's more work than I did before. I put in 16 hours a day, most days, 5 or 6 days a week. And it's my decision to do so. So the reason that people become progressives, Steve, is because every single year, at very least, $2,000 billion, that is $2 million a day, every day since the birth of Christ, every single year, gets taken from some people and given to other people. And you are going to have to make a choice. Which one are you going to be? If you're an individualist, you figure, okay, my life is my life. I can do as much or as little with it as I want to. Nobody owes me anything. I don't deserve anything from other people. Assistance is nice. It's nice to get a hand when if I stumble or fall or something, but then I'm expected to get back up and I'll help somebody else if they fall. But I'm not going to carry them around for the rest of my life. So you're an individualist. You figure, what do you want? What do you like? What do you want? What do you want and what do you like? This is the essence of freedom, you see. We talk about freedom like we see parchment and we see people standing on hills, and maybe we think about, soldiers dying for it. But basically, when you get right down to it, it's what do you want to do? And is anybody stopping you from doing it? And here in America, the answer is pretty much no. You could say, well, I'm being stopped by the fact that I'm a wage slave to the capitalist system. Really? Yes, I want to have a very nice house, but since I work for a corporation, I'll never have enough money to afford a nice house like the rich people. My reply to that would be, then stop working for a corporation. Make your own corporation. If you want big wealth, you have to go and find it. You have to go and make it. You have to create it out of thin air. 94%, 96%, 96%, I think. 96% of all businesses in the United States are gone before 10 years are up. 4% of all business startups last 10 years or longer. 4%. And as I say in this video I'm working on now, as a little sneak peek for you, if 19 times out of 20 you decide that you don't want to be a wage slave and you bet the farm and maybe you mortgage your house or whatever you need to do to start your business, 19 times out of 20 times that doesn't work. And you don't have anything anymore. You didn't even have what you started with. And guess what? Your employees got paid and the government got paid. You got nothing. You got not only did you not get anything, you probably have debt that you're going to have to carry for the rest of your life. And this is what it takes to have a nice house. I mean, a really big house. Anybody in America who works hard can have a nice house. Anybody in this country who works hard can have a very nice house, especially if they do. When I say a very nice house, I don't mean a big house. I don't mean an expensive house. I mean a very nice house. And especially if you do things like, you don't get married until, you don't have kids until you're married. You don't get out of school until you have at least a high school diploma. There's no poverty for people in that group. So in any event, there you go. It's a long time coming there, Steve, but it's a whole bunch of things together. And I just don't like these people very much because they're not very nice people. And they're liars and hypocrites. $900 million.